you. Thank you for having me. So my reflections are going to be a bit less broad compared to the one Caitlin came across, and I'm going to focus in particular on assessment and teaching practices. So it's very good that Caitlin provided us this very nice sort of framing of the issues. When reflecting on how to respond to generative AI, I mean, my center, and I'm sure Eden here had to do the same last year, had to respond to the panic that was spreading across colleagues. And I remember like people screaming and shouting in physical and digital spaces, finding out what was happening and say, oh my God, my assessment is completely compromised. We must stop it. And I said, well, good luck with that. How do we stop it? You know? And so most certainly we can acknowledge that one year down, I mean, we are not in control of this, but we are not as anxious. We are starting to have productive conversations about that. But what really bugs me is still that big bulk of the debate is still around academic integrity. So, and to a certain extent, because we are still looking at academic integrity, we are still perceiving AI as a sort of enemy in many of the conversations that we are having. And that is quite a negative framing that I say a year down, we should try to overcome, you know. So most certainly there was an urgency there because our assessments were being rolling. We were in the midst of the academic year, first semester already gone. What are we going to do with it, you know? But now we can do a bit better than just panicking, okay? And academic integrity is an issue, but there is much more around AI. So everybody was talking about assessment, and one of the things that was really bothering me was people were talking about protecting their assessment. So basically means let's you know, forget that AI exists or like lock it outside the door as much as we can and not worry about it. And I'm going to stick to the old world, to the old way of doing things rather than actually accept the AI is there. But to me, there is even a graver issue here that I think people were talking about assessment and they were not talking about learning outcomes. Ultimately, assessment is a way to evidence learning outcomes. But the thing that we should worry as educators in higher education and at any level of education is what are our learning outcomes. And we see, if we perceive and we frame issues according to this perspective, we come to realize that students are going to live in a world where AI actually exists. So how can we exclude AI from our learning outcomes? Yeah, we're going to cheat the students if we don't embed AI within our learning outcomes, for the good and for the bad. Okay, so this is my starting point, because from here, then I'm going to start to reflect about assessment. So most certainly UEA, it was really interesting to see how different institutions actually responded to that. UEA, the institution I'm coming from, University of East Anglia, just basically sort of say, well, you know, let's tweak the policy, but we really don't need to go into a lot of detailed change. We're just basically going to say, whatever you passed as yours and is not yours, fruit of your labor, is going to be plagiarism or collusion. And this doesn't matter where it comes from. So obviously, if you use ChatGPT or any kind of AI generative tool and you don't say that you're doing so, you're falling foul of policy, you know. But then we pretty much said, okay, you know, like if we teach students how to acknowledge the existence of AI, they might be using it. And then the issue is going to shift to something that we are much more familiar with. When students reference Wikipedia, and I don't know in your experience, but I had experience with students reference Wikipedia. You know? So the issue is like, well, if you reference a source that is not an academic reference, a scholarly reference, I'm going to deal with that in those terms. At least we know what we're talking about, you know, and there is a conversation to be had there, you know. But yeah, this was the starting point. But then what comes next? What comes next? You know. So the way that the way that I developed a sort of conversation in my institution about what to do with assessment in artificial intelligence world is that you can do two things basically. You can design in or design out. So you can basically embed artificial intelligence in our assessments. And of course, this, according to the premise that I gave in my first slide, should be the way forward. At least the sum of our assessment should actually embed AI, because AI is something that is going to be out there and our students need to be prepared on how to use it. So we cannot pretend that it doesn't exist. But we can design it out, okay? And designing out is another route. So designing mechanism, designing assessments, designing tasks that can contain the use of AI or prevent the use of AI, because AI is completely useless in those kind of setups. What is the most traditional one, and what is the one that for which many institutions or colleagues went for? Lock the students in a room and do a nice traditional closed book exam. By all means, assessment needs to be fit to purpose. If that is fit to purpose, be my guests. But for many other learning outcomes, that's not fit to purpose. So designing out can be very traditionally intended, and for certain aspects, perhaps that's the right solution. But designing out can mean that you can be more creative as well, and explore alternatives and explore other options to engage the students in forms of assessments that do not require or exclude the use of AI. So yeah, I mean, I was listening to Phil Dawson. He's a big expert of contract cheating, based in Cradle, Australia. And he was saying, imagine a task for which the students has to produce a piece which is going to score 100% on Turnitin. 100%. And then they have to rewrite the same piece, scoring 0% on Turnitin. By the end of that process, the students will have achieved their learning outcome, for sure. You know, and I mean, this is a bit of an extreme example if you think about it. But all sorts of tasks that sort of ask the students to criticize, to analyze what is the output and challenge it. I believe that in the future, we are going to assess students prompting AI. And marking the prompts that students are going to give to AI is what we are going to do, you know, because that is where the knowledge actually resides and the critical ability is going to reside. But designing out, yeah, you can embrace traditional methods. A lot of colleagues say, oh, you know, chartered bodies and institutions are actually requiring still closed book assessments, so this is not going to happen, they're going to do that. It's not true. My other half works in a field where he actually works, he has to take a lot of these certifications, and a lot of these closed book exams, very high level, are now being turned in take-home assignments. And then what happens is that he receives a call 1 or 2 days later, and they sort of concept check. And they say, well, you know, in that page, you actually wrote this. What was the rationale for this? What was the insight? What were you thinking when you were answering that question? And they should do some sort of, it is a plagiarism check, if you like, right? But they sort of spot check the thinking. And that's a possible design, you know? So even charter bodies are actually transitioning to an open book assessment kind of frame, you know? So it's not true that this is going to stay there for long. But we can think about something a bit more innovative than that, you know? And focusing on problem-solving tasks, focusing on creative tasks, changing the nature of the task that we have. So ChatGPT tends to sort of waffle a lot. So reducing word limit and having like tight reports is a possible way to amend the task. We have to think about inclusivity when we do that. My own response was actually considering Viva Voce assessment. And what I've been teaching for a long time has been a module in history economic thought, which is quite conceptual, it's quite philosophical. It's basically philosophy of science applied to economics, for which, you know, a written assignment in a closed book environment was really not suited for students to showcase their abilities and the skills. So I will advocate that we should go back to the Middle Ages. You know, we always think about going back to the Middle Ages as something old, traditional, and conservatives. Not really. The very word assessment comes from Latin, adsidio, I sit next to you. And I sit next to you to have a conversation. In the Middle Ages, when universities were founded, people were having conversation for assessment. And I advocate that we should bring it back. Okay? Because ChatGPT is not going to do it for you. Okay? So by all means, we can embed the ChatGPT within assessment. We can actually have ChatGPT helping us with those conversations. But we can actually exclude the ChatGPT from this conversation. And why not? I mean, it's already dominating the public debate. We can exclude it from a conversation that we have with our students, right? And Viva Voce assessment should be what we do, in my opinion. And by all means, I go all the way on the spectrum. I have like job interview kind of vibes. But I'm not saying that everybody needs to do what I'm doing. There are different points on the spectrum. We have presentations. Where students have like, you know, they just don't start to deliver. but you can find yourself in the middle and just have a question and answer at the end of the presentation that sort of challenges the students, So you can position yourself anywhere on the spectrum, and there is a spectrum, So Viva Voce assessment is pretty uncommon. Cambridge and Oxford one day in the 1700s decided that they were not going to do it anymore. And that's the reason why all the English-speaking world are not doing them anymore. But they are common in other countries like Italy, where I was trained. And that's the reason why I advocate for that. I went through the process, I went through the motion. And I think it's one of the things that saved me from a very deductive kind of approach compared to the British system. The advantage of Italians is that they've done rivals. Let's talk about employability. What's nearest to a job interview than having a Bible? Academic integrity, I already told you, is about designing out, but ultimately it's about taking the opportunity to explore learning outcomes. We were talking about everything, generative AI as a learning outcome, but giving the students the opportunity to learn how to talk and having a conversation is also a very important learning outcome. So there is this big disruption about generative AI, but this can become an opportunity to actually reflect much more broadly and critically about all the kind of assessment designs that we are going to engage with. So John Attrato used to be in person number 2 at the Office for National Statistics, and is now at HMRC. He's a UEA graduate that comes to talk to our students. This is what he says when he gives talks to our students about what it does when you think about recruiting a new person. The students are all worried about their statistics and econometrics. And he said, I don't care about that. I think about, will I be able to actually send somebody to brief the Prime Minister in 6 months' time? Will they be able to string 3 words together? Perhaps not. And that's the worry. Yeah? So what I do is pretty much, booking conversation on my Outlook, and I just allowing students to come in and having this kind of chats with me. It's all recorded, so quality assurance is completely checked. And I deliver this kind of assessment, and now basically this is a practice that is spreading at the University of East Anglia. So that's pretty much what I do. It's all quality assurance typed, so it's got exactly the same cover as any other assessment. They will never allow me to do that if you were in that case. But that's pretty much what I've been doing. By all means, if people want to have conversations about this, and I don't want to say this is a drop in the ocean, but just another idea to put on the table of things that we can do in the face of generative AI, perhaps bring it back to the picture.